you got to deal with the consequences, no matter what they may be. So it's a teachable moment for all of us, right? You stand for something or you fall for anything. So if you're going to stand for something, you got to take the consequences with it.
In a world where the recruitment of Black educators dominates headlines, one question remains: where are the conversations with folks who are leaving education? Introducing The Exit Interview, a podcast dedicated to archiving the untold stories of Black folks who have departed from traditional education spaces. I'm Dr. Lyons, and I'm embarking on a mission alongside my esteemed guests. Together, we shed light on the challenges, triumphs, and experiences of Black educators, aiming to inform and empower communities to invest in understanding the crucial issue of retention in education. Welcome to The Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators. All right, folks, welcome back to The Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators with me, your host, Dr. Asia. It is a beautiful day in March in Denver. We're finally getting some spring weather, and I am not mad about it. But we're not talking about weather today. We're talking about Akil Parkera, who's come to our show. And we met at South by. Welcome to the show, Akil.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Well, I mean, I always enjoy having conversations about math and education, but the way you ran down on me at South by Southwest in the hallway, I really respected it. That's how I be sometimes with running down on people to like tell them about my YouTube channel and the resources that I have for the community. So it just showed how much confidence you have in your platform and having these types of conversations with educators. So that also made me really be on your platform.
Yeah, I appreciate
thank
that.
you.
Oh, yeah, of course. I love a good street interview. I love meeting Black folks in community. There's not a ton of Black educators here in Colorado. I think I've said this so many times. We have less than 1,000 Black educators here in the state. So when we have an opportunity to be able to just talk to folks out, and you're in Philly, but talk to people all over the country, all over the world, educators sharing their journey, I'm on it. Like, I have to get out and talk to people. So yeah, thank you for stopping and chatting. And now fast forward 2, 3, 4 weeks later, we're here and sharing your story. So we'll start off with our first question. Lots of folks come on the podcast and they have a journey into education. Some people start off in TFA. Some people knew since they were a child. Other people fall up on education when they're an undergrad. What's been your journey into education?
So my journey into education is I was a career changer and I never wanted to be a teacher. I was one of those people that kind of bought into the negative propaganda around education. Like, it's too much work. It's too hard. Or these kids are crazy. I'm not trying to, teach other people's kids. And initially, and also there was the money aspect. I grew up listening to commercial rap music and I was trying to get rich. I was listening to all the drug dealer rap and everything. And I'm like, I want the cars and then the clothes and the women and everything. So I got to go get rich. So let me pursue a major that might enable me to do that. So I ended up majoring in finance. And I had intentions of like going to Wall Street, being like an investment banker or equities trader or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that didn't work out. So I ended up graduating from Morgan State University back in like 2003. I ended up moving to Philadelphia and I worked in Delaware at the FDIC. And I did that for a year, but I wasn't as glamorous and I wasn't really a good fit for that. So I did that for a year. Then after that, they were going to fire me because I wasn't a good fit. And then I ended up resigning. And then I was looking for my next move. And I really got forced into education because I had a baby on the way. I was expecting a child. So there was an economic necessity to kind of become a teacher. But first, I hooked up with this agency here in Philly. It was like a temp agency for teachers and tutors. So I didn't want to teach. I didn't want to substitute teach. I just wanted to tutor. So I was doing that at first. And then I had this opportunity to be a long-term sub at this charter school down North Philly. And it was a long-term sub position for the whole like fourth quarter, 10th grade geometry. And the teacher had just went on like medical leave. So they just needed somebody in there. So I went for a couple of days. And then the person that ran the agency said, give it a couple of days. If you want to stay, that's fine. You can stay. If not, I'll find somebody else. And then I was there for like a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then over the weekend, I just thought about it. And I was like, you know what? Let me stay with this and see what happens. Because I think that teaching is something that if I decide to put my mind to it, I probably could become good at it one day. That was actually 20 years ago. It was March of 2005, when I took that position.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yeah. So this is my 20-year anniversary of stepping in the classroom. Even though I was a sub, but I was going to work every day.
I think it's ironic that you went into finance to make money and then ended up going in education to make money, right?
Yeah, yeah.
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 And first of all, I appreciate you saying that you were going to be fired, but you decided to resign because a lot of people want to skip past those kind of parts of their life. Like, oh, it was just not a good fit. It's like, bro, I was supposed to be fired. I was
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
lose my job. And at the same time, sometimes when people lose their job closes, or whatever the situation is, that's like the best thing. It just takes us in a whole different direction that we would have never thought of going. But it was because of something outside circumstance.
That was a real shock to my ego too, because I really had to do some like soul searching because I'd never been like fired from a job for performance before, but it was audit work and there was just accounting that I wasn't aware of. Like I took accounting courses in undergrad, but I think the amount of accounting that they listed on the job posting that they required, I had that amount of accounting on my transcript. But the amount that the actual job functions required more accounting coursework that I didn't take.
Mm,
It was a bit of false advertising, right?
sure.
Or else they wouldn't have hired me. But I was equipped based upon their job posting. And I think this too, like if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have let them fire me because then I might have been able to file some type of complaint because I
Sure.
was the trainee and they assigned me like a mentor examiner. But this lady never worked with me like that whole year. Barely saw that lady. She was always out on the road doing an examination of some bank like far away somewhere. I never even seen that woman or worked with her, right? And the supervisor kind of kicked it to me like he was hooking me up. He was like, you might want to just resign because then you won't have a termination on your file in case you ever want to get a government employment again. You know, it won't look like a blemish on your record. So, I figured like, all right, cool. That sounds good. So let me do that. Let me go ahead and resign, right? But I should have just, looking back on it, probably should have been like, nah, go ahead and fire me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I want on my record. I want the termination on my record. I want that. Let me get that.
Akil out here giving us 2X interviews, y'all. He said, no, I want to go back. Let's start back in 2006. I want to talk about
Yeah,
this too. I appreciate
yeah.
that. I cut you off in your story. You over the weekend, you're like, let me just figure this out. So what happened after that?
I went back and I was figuring stuff out, started putting together lesson plans and working with some of the other teachers in the math department and practicing teaching. It's being a long-term substitute. If anybody's familiar with that, it's a little awkward because you're a substitute, but you're not because you're going to be there every day. So you're like the official teacher, but then you're not really the official teacher because the kids still know you just a substitute. So it's like,
Mhm.
it's a fine line that you have to toe, but it was a learning experience, learning how to like interact with youth, learning different learning styles, learning like about professionalism, learning what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, just a lot of things. Yes, that was my introduction into teaching, and I used to wear back then, because again, I was a substitute. I was like 24 years old. So I'm going in there with Dickie suits on and Tim's on, like, you know what I
Too
mean? Like,
cool. You just too
I went in there
cool.
looking like I was like hanging out on the block all night, before I came to work. I wasn't, but that's how, that's how we were dressing back then. I'm in Philly, like State Property was real popular back then, you know what I mean? So,
Oh man, you taking us
so
back.
yeah, so that was early in my career.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did you go back to school? Did you need to do that? Did you have like emergency certification? How did that work?
I finished that school year, and then incidentally, that school needed a English teacher for summer school. So I ended up teaching summer school, ninth grade English. I kind of jumped at that opportunity, well, because I needed some money for one, but for
Yeah.
two, I had the opportunity to like teach. One of the texts we were teaching was To Kill a Mockingbird. And I knew that that was like popular literature, and I had never read it. So I said, oh, well, if I teach this, this will give me an opportunity to like read that book, and I can get paid at the
Mhm.
same time. So I ended up doing that. And then at the end of the summer school, I started putting out my resume. So this is like '05. So we still using fax machines back then. So I'm like going places to fax my resume to like almost every charter school in Philly.
Oh, so by then you bitten by the bug. You like, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this for real. And then my son ended up being born that August. So this is like late July, early August. Like I said, I got a baby on the way, so I need a job. So I'm just sending my resume out to a lot of charter schools because I had been told that the traditional public schools were more stringent on their hiring requirements. And I wasn't certified. I didn't have an education degree. So the charter schools were what I thought was a better move to get opportunities. And one or two hit me back. I went on a few interviews, but one I went on an interview. After the interview, they said, we would like to keep you on as a building sub, right? So if anybody's familiar with that, you go to work every day in the event that somebody's absent. In a lot of schools, it's always going to be somebody absent, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, so if somebody's absent, you're just going to go to their class. You know what I'm saying? You like the sixth man off the bench. You just there, ready to go. Like Kurt Rambis back in the day on the LA Lakers, somebody like that. You know what I mean?
I don't watch sports, but the audience might. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's
they
for
might though.
y'all.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So, but then what happened was I went home and I was like, okay, that's cool. I'll accept that. I got a phone call like that afternoon. They called me back to say, we just found out that our 11th grade Algebra 2 teacher just informed us that she needs to leave next week because her husband accepted a position in Connecticut. So she's leaving in a
Mm,
week. So
mm,
would you like to have her position? And I was like, yes, sign me up. Definitely. So it was just like the universe worked in my favor. So it was
for
like meant to
sure.
be. So officially, my first full-time teaching position started in September of 2005. So that's coming up. And yeah, that's how I got started in the classroom. And then teaching, I had 3 sections of Algebra 2. It's another lesson I learned. One section of elementary functions, which really wasn't elementary functions because the students in the elementary functions course really didn't have strong Algebra 1 skills. So it really ended up being an Algebra 1 class.
Explain to us what elementary functions are, what that class entails.
Yeah. So it's more like a pre-calculus course where you're doing a lot of work dealing with like the basic functions in algebra. So you have like the absolute value function, which is shaped like a V, and very intent, heavy on being able to express equations graphically, right? So absolute value function is like a V. You got your linear function, which is a straight line. You got your parabolas, your quadratic functions of parabolas like a U, or they could be, it's like the McDowell's arch from Coming to America. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? What else we got? The radical function. Yeah. And then you got the logarithmic
Now,
function.
folks, if y'all not watching this on YouTube, y'all missing all the hand movements that he's doing. So if you can't go on to YouTube and watch him do all these movements.
Yeah,
Go
yeah, yeah.
ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, the sine and the cosine, the wave, you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? So you got the sine function, the cosine function. But yeah, just all of these functions, right? Teaching the piecewise functions. Well, not piecewise, but like the step function or the greatest integer function. Elementary functions is meant to focus in on like all of those basic primary functions and that we encounter in algebra, and then also being able to express them as equations and also dealing with applications of those actual functions, like how would you use them, which is such an important question. Like, how do we use this? Because that makes the math realistic.
Yeah.
It brings it
Yeah.
to life and lets the students see, oh, okay, this is what I could possibly use this for. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was elementary functions, but the students really required a more of a foundation in algebra. And that particular class, it was a senior class, right? That particular elementary functions class, it became a dumping ground over the years, right? Because
Mm,
it was a small class because the school configured this relationship with the Community College of Philadelphia, where the students would get dual enrollment and take a math course on campus, which was a great idea. But they really needed more support in terms of making sure they were actually going to class and not just taking it as an opportunity to just not be in the building.
yeah. Just hanging out.
Yeah, a lot of them ended up like failing and they realized this is actually difficult. I'm gonna have to actually do work over here. So some of them talked to the counselor and withdrew themselves from the dual enrollment. It was like every other day, like another kid get dumped in the class, so the
Oh, I
class got
see.
bigger and bigger, So only like a couple of students like made it to the end. It was for 2 semesters. It was 2 math courses, one for the fall semester, one for the spring semester over at Community College of Philadelphia. So the class got bigger and bigger as time went on. That was my first full year teaching. 3 sections of Algebra 2 and 1 section of so-called elementary functions, which was really Algebra 1/Algebra 2.
When you thinking back on those days, like you said, had a degree in finance, but this is not finance. This is teaching children. And obviously you were learning how to work with kids, like you said. Was there a time at night on the weekends that you had to study the math book and like dust off your memory? Or was it always like, oh yeah, I remember this is no problem? Was there any challenges with you trying to figure out how to break something down from how you understand it to how the kids could understand it? Like, what was that like seeing how you did not go to school to be a math teacher?
Every night I was at home, usually like sitting in my living room with the TV on, with my textbook open, going through the problems that were on the curriculum, which I was following at first. And I'm like refreshing my memory on like, how do you solve systems of equations using the substitution method again? Like, how do you do that? Like,
Mm,
how do you graph these functions? You know what I mean? Like that was every night thing. And then like also like even during the day, like talking to other math teachers that were more experienced and or that had more math content knowledge than I did, having those conversations, looking to them for support. But yeah, I was like back in school myself. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of the class, like and like not know how to do something. that I'm supposed to teach. And I'm like, you don't even know how to do it. But then at the same time, and this is something I talk about a lot today about, like, especially within math instruction, the way I look at it, I mean, it may be more ways to kind of dissect math instruction, but I kind of dissect math instruction down in two different ways. One is like algorithmic instruction, and the other is conceptual instruction. And what I realized was that as a child, most of my instruction was very algorithm based. And I was very good with like learning formulas, memorizing the steps in the algorithm and being able to get the answer. But I didn't really understand concept behind the
Yeah.
algorithm or why the algorithm makes sense. Like I didn't really
Yeah.
get all that. And oftentimes I think in the schools I went to, that wasn't a major emphasis. But nowadays, and this is why I like Common Core. So I always jump into conversations around so-called new math, right?
Say it. I was going to say that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because really the Common Core, if it's taught effectively, what it can do is provide a conceptual understanding of the math for the children. So then they'll have a better understanding of the relationship between numbers, numeracy. They'll be more mathematically flexible. They won't be just locked into just one way of doing everything, right? So then you end up with certain problems. It's like if you only know one way to do it, it becomes very inefficient with a certain particular problem, the way a problem might be set up, then it's very inefficient to do that way. But if you knew two other ways, then you could pick a better method. And a lot of people push back on it because we were taught algorithmically, like, look, just give me the formula, give me the steps, and let me get the answer. But
Yes.
now children are being challenged to like think and think critically and figure stuff out. But like I said, like it doesn't always work because the teachers have to be trained properly, right? So when I was first in the classroom, I'm giving my students the algorithms. I'm like, why aren't y'all getting this? Just memorize the algorithm, just follow the steps and just
Yes.
do a bunch of
Yes.
problems. And I think that has value at times, but I think that should be supplemented by a conceptual understanding. And a lot of us don't have a conceptual understanding. And I think that leads to people hating math because I never loved math initially, right? People assume I loved math because they say, oh, you're a math teacher, a math professor, you teach math on YouTube and, you know, all this and that. And oh, you do math tutoring. You must have loved math your whole life. I'm like, nah, I liked getting good grades when I was young. And I knew that getting good grades was the byproduct of doing well in math. So it was like, it was a means to an end. I liked math, but I didn't really love her though. It was like, she was cool. Like,
We
you know
hung
what I
out.
mean? Like, yeah,
We
we hung
hung
out.
out.
I wouldn't claim her though. You know what I mean? You might catch us on campus together in the cafeteria, maybe,
But
but
we
you know what I'm
not
saying?
hold hands.
That ain't my girl. You know what I'm saying? Like, that ain't my girl. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, she for everybody. You know what I'm saying? It's like, hey,
Right. She for
I'm
the
not claiming
streets.
her. Yeah, I'm not claiming her. Yeah, she for the pavement. Yeah, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
For
you know?
the pavement. Oh,
Yeah,
Lord, East Coast. Oh.
yeah. When I developed my conceptual understanding, like around like 6 or 7 years ago, when I started teaching at Cheney, because they wanted me to teach math methods. So I'm teaching education majors how to teach math, right? So that way, when they get into their classrooms, they'll be able to show these concepts to young children, right?
Well, let's hold on for that because
All
I
right.
do want to talk about this transition, right? You were at the charter school for how long? And then let's kind of talk about
Yeah,
that
yeah, let's
journey
go back.
to get there.
So that particular charter school, I was there for 3 years. And I was there on, right, you asked me also about certification. So I had an emergency certification and then that ran out. Then they let me go. So then I found another school. It was a teacher that I was cool with at that school that had a homeboy that he went to college with. That was a teacher at another charter school in Philly. Then we connected and then he was like, hey, you know, we need a math teacher anyway. So I ended up sending my resume over there, did an interview and everything and, you know, ended up over there, you know, at the next charter school. While I was at the next charter school, I ended up getting my certification
Okay.
through a program. There was a program called the American Board of Certification for Teacher Excellence. So I had to take 2 courses. It was like an abbreviated process to math certification. I had to take like 2 courses online and they did the observations. They partnered with a university in Pittsburgh, I think Point Park University in
Mhm.
Pittsburgh. And they had a professor like fly out to Philly to observe me, I think 3 times during this one school year. And then they
Oh,
also had their
wow.
own certification exam. So I didn't have to take the praxis. This organization created their own exam, which was comparable to the praxis for subject matter, the math grade 7 through 12 to get a grade 7 through 12 certification. They created their own exam. So I took that exam. First time I took it, I failed it. I hadn't studied enough. It went all the way up to calculus. So, but the second time I was grinding. I was getting ready.
Yeah.
I had like one of my bedrooms upstairs, which was my office back then before my daughter was born, and that became her bedroom. I was like writing Cartesian planes on the wall. I had the unit circle drawn on the wall. I was serious.
You were
Like,
in it. Yeah.
yeah, like every weekend, like on Saturdays, I would just be in the house, just studying, just grinding, just to get
Yeah.
prepared. But yeah, so, I started out at that first charter school down in South Philly for 3 years. That was my first home. And then went to another school past North Philly near Broad and Olney. The second school was called Delaware Valley Charter High School, or Del Val as we called it. The first school was World Communications Charter. And I started teaching at Del Val, and I was there for 4 years. And I kind of like learned a lot and kind of really grew as a teacher, like grew into like really being a teacher in that school.
It's interesting that you're saying that because by this time you had 6 years under your belt and then you went to the school and you said, and this third school is when you felt like, for real, I'm a teacher. Or what do you feel like shifted in you or in the environment that made you feel like I feel solid in my craft? I feel like I'm really doing what I need to do.
I think just developing routines and also like kind of being able to know what's to be expected. Finding myself in situations like where I know how this is going to end. I know how this is going to go because I've already experienced this, right?
Say more about that.
Whether it's like discipline issues, whether it's like instructional issues, especially like with teaching math, like you kind of develop expectations for what students are going to understand if you explain it a certain way, what many students won't understand if you explain it a certain way. Once I like kind of develop that rhythm of knowing, okay, well, I know this will influence your lesson planning because a lot of times the book will just give you go over this, but then you're reading the book. These authors are not taking into consideration the fact that many students do not understand this aspect or this common mistake that a lot of students make. Like, great example, multiplying a whole number by a fraction. A lot of students will multiply that whole number by the numerator and the denominator. They do that all the time. So that's something that you got to point out. You got to say, listen, don't do that. And then even show them this is why this doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Like you said, the conceptual part. Yeah.
Just things like that that you have to include in your lessons. And then like just the students, how they engaged me and interacted with me. And that's, that working at that second school, Del Val, that's another good termination story. I really did get fired from there. Like I didn't get a chance to resign. I got fired from there too.
You going to tell us about that? We just want to be left out here.
Oh, no, I'll tell you about it. Yeah, so that school, I became more like outspoken about certain things. Another thing that happened while I was at that school is I realized that there was a shift in my educational philosophy. Well, the shift actually started at the first school I was at because I was doing a lot of reading at the same time. Like I'm studying a lot of like Black history and African history, and I'm looking at like different like political science texts and getting back into my consciousness and whatnot, studying Amos Wilson and John Henrik Clark and different revolutionaries and whatnot. And I'm thinking differently about education, and I'm realizing like, I don't really want to be a company man. And I'm noticing like the dichotomy, whereas like in a lot of schools, it's like this dynamic of from teachers and administrators, it's like us versus the kids. And once I realized that, I'm like, I'm not down for that because I'm not against the kids. It's not a prison. Like, it's not like the warden and the COs versus the inmates. Like, I'm not down for that, which can lead to a lot of challenges with your colleagues because then your colleagues are like, you're too friendly with the kids or like you want to be their friends. And it's like, no, it's not about me wanting to be their friends. It's about me wanting to treat them like humans. And a lot of the policies and protocols you have in place completely and unapologetically like disregard their humanity. And it doesn't even provide like good education. That's not the outcome. It's really a lot of this stuff is just about control.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yes.
So once I realized that, yeah, this principal might sign my checks every 2 weeks, but I don't really work for him or I don't really work for her. I work for these kids. So that became my focus. Fast forward, like around the fourth year that I was at the second school, Del Val, I became very outspoken about certain things and things that I didn't agree with. Some stuff I just thought like, this is just dumb. Like, why are we doing this? Like, just different policies. Like, I know one time I got called out in the car, but I had to go into a meeting for this. The classrooms had phones in them, right? I'm always trying to think of like learning opportunities and teachable moments for young people. And I'm always thinking about how people always complain about like call a business and they have poor customer service, right? And I'm thinking like, well, maybe some of these people never learned how to answer a phone. Maybe they don't know what it means to be, how to politely answer a phone and speak or whatever. So I'm like, you know what? Instead of having my telephone on my desk and me be the person that like, I got to stop my lesson and like, when the phone rings, stop what I'm doing and run all the way to the back of my room and like grab the phone and answer it. I'm going to put the phone on a student's desk and then have them practice. I'm teaching 11th and 12th graders, right?
They're almost adults.
That are about to graduate. So I'm like, you know what? Let me be proactive. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put the phone on the student's desk, have the student answer the phone. I'm going to show them up front. Like, listen, when you answer the phone, you say, good afternoon or good morning, Mr. Parker's class. Who's speaking? And then all it would be is like, send so-and-so down to the office. You know how they do. The secretary calls or whatever. So I started doing that. So a couple of days after I did it, I get an email. Phone rang one day. Then somebody hopped on the phone. I think it was the vice principal. And she was like, you're not allowed to have students answering the phone. And I'll admit, I probably shouldn't have done this there. It probably wasn't the right time and place when I reflected on it. But I stood my ground and I said, well, why does that make sense? Why can't they practice speaking on the phone, right? And then it escalated and it didn't escalate too much because I was trying to get back to my lesson.
Oh, you were asking the assistant principal this while your kids were standing there.
Yeah, so I was in the middle of a and I think part of the reason that I went there was because I was annoyed. Bro, I'm trying to teach, bro. Like, why are we having this conversation?
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to teach right now. Like, why are you calling me? Because I think what happened was this. They needed somebody in the class 10 minutes earlier. The secretary called for the person. When the secretary realized that a student answered the phone, they then went back and told the vice principal. So then the vice principal called my office 5 minutes later while I'm teaching to have this conversation.
So we back to back on the phone calls, and I'm trying to...
Yeah, and I'm like, listen, I'm trying to teach calculus right now. I'm trying to talk about derivatives right now. I don't want to talk to you right now. I'm trying to talk about derivatives to my students right now. I didn't say that, but that was my mentality.
Because you work for the students.
Exactly.
You work for the students.
Yes. So I'm trying to, so then I ended up having to have a meeting. And then they had their dossier of different things you've done this year and whatnot. So I also knew that I was going to get laid off, right? Because the other thing the school was doing was some of us as teachers decided to unionize. So the school, and it was a charter school, which is kind of rare, for charter schools to be unionized, right? So we were going to unionize, but the contract didn't go into effect until June 1st. So the school had to do all their typical activities, which denied due process to teachers by May 31st. So that means basically you got to lay everybody off that you want to get rid of by May 31st before the contract goes into play, right? Before they become unionized. So I'm a mathematician. I teach math. So I'm smart enough to know, okay, yeah, they definitely getting rid of me. No way. They laid off maybe about 10 teachers and some other staff, right? And then they give out the letters during school. They walked around the school building and wild children are there and everything. And it's wild, right? So this is May 31st. I get my letter. Children are very upset. I wasn't trying to say nothing, but they knew what it was because other people that got letters or other teachers, people were visibly upset. So I'm trying to downplay it and whatnot because I told them it's probably going to happen. It's probably going to be what it is. And this is part of life. You take a stand on certain things. You may rub people the wrong way. People may begin to dislike. You got to deal with the consequences, no matter what they may be. So it's a teachable moment for all of us, right? You stand for something or you fall for anything. So if you're going to stand for something, you got to take the consequences with it. So some of the students were very upset, allegedly, started to vandalize certain parts of the building. Some lockers might have got knocked down. So I heard might have been some graffiti. Some of the students might have left the building in protest. And I was held accountable for that because I'm the popular teacher. I'm the cool teacher that everybody likes. Everybody was mad that I was the one that got laid off. So instead of me finishing the school year and teaching up until June 15th or what an official last day, the principal was upset. And then he converted my layoff to a termination. He got the security to escort me out the building. I was cool with the security, so, it wasn't nothing too crazy. But I was like, all right, it's cool. It's no problem. Got them to escort me out the building and then sent me an email telling me that I would have to contact the director of security to schedule a time to come back into the building after hours to come collect my things, right?
Yeah.
They didn't want me in the building and whatnot. I taught mostly seniors that year. So that ended up leading to one of the highlights of my career up to that point, which was their graduation. Because I still came to their graduation. I think that the principal probably didn't want me to be there, but I still came to the graduation. It's a public event, right? Because the thing about working at this particular school, I kind of matriculated with them. There were some students that I started teaching them my first year in that building, they were freshmen. And then I remember I had a section of Algebra 1, my first year there. And then I had 4 sections of PSSA is a standardized test in Pennsylvania, right? So I was there teaching PSSA math prep. That was the name of the other course I was teaching. But it was one Algebra 1 course for ninth graders. And some of those students matriculated with me. I taught them as sophomores, I taught them as juniors, I taught them as seniors. And one of the girls that I taught from 10th grade, she was giving a speech and she was talking about, the teachers that supported them throughout the way. And she mentioned my name. And then she was looking for me in the crowd. And then she yelled out all the way to the back, like, stand up, park. And then, so then I stood up. I wasn't trying to, make too much noise, you know what I mean? Because I knew how the situation was and whatnot. I wasn't trying to be extra. I wasn't trying to do too much. But, when she said I stood up, I got like a standing ovation, like from all the students on stage. And then a lot of the parents, and then everybody's like, whispering, asking questions like, why he get fired? Why he get fired? So then I think that made the principal even more angry, right? Because then it made it seem as though it was a me versus him type of scenario. As soon as he could, he came to the microphone after her and then tried to divert the attention away from me and highlight some of the other teachers in the building and make mention of some of the other teachers and staff. That was one of the highlights, but that's because, I ended up taking a stand. And let me also be honest too, because I was a Black man that taught math and had a math certification, I kind of had room to talk my shit because I knew that, like, okay, so the worst y'all can do is fire me. That's the worst y'all could do, right? But if y'all do that, I can go other places and still make money and feed my kids. So that did play a part, like, just to be quite honest. So, like, I had a bit of leverage because of, like, my professional credentials, which is something that I tell the young people, you want to have some type of background or some type of credentials that will feed you and will be able to, like, where you'll be marketable and employable, be able to, like, procure resources for yourself and for your family. That's like my termination story. But again, even to that point, I guess on a larger scale, when I look at that, because a lot of people are, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't like to tell those stories because a lot of people are embarrassed about getting fired, but it all depends on, like, contextually how you view that, like what perspective you look at that from. Like, I look at a lot of the revolutionaries that I've studied. A lot of them, like, you look at, like, Malcolm X in the last year of his life. Like in 1964, he tried to enter France because he was going to do some work in France, do some speaking. The government in France told him, no, you can't come in here. He was banned from coming to France. Kwame Ture was born in Trinidad. The government, because of his revolutionary work and his revolutionary politics, they told him, you can't come back into Trinidad. You can't come into your homeland because we fear what you may stir up among the people. So if you look at the politics of the leadership in place and the ideology and the educational philosophy of the leadership in place, if it's not a righteous philosophy, if y'all actually do like and support and promote me, then I got to look at myself. We don't have the same ideology. We're very different. We shouldn't be on the same side. So it's almost like if you decide to fire me, then I know I'm doing something right.
Yeah. So this is really interesting because, first of all, we have a very similar story. I always tell people when I left education, they definitely gave my contract, but it's because they needed teachers. I was the teacher that students did a walkout for. I was the teacher who the kids had silent protests and not so silent protests. And after that, my principal hated me and tried everything that she could do to get me to leave and to make my life hell. But I'm on the right side of history, right? And I think about this right now in the news. There's a woman, a teacher in Utah, who has a poster on her wall that says, all are welcome. And it has different colored hands, brown, white, whatever, different colors on the poster. And she's getting some pushback from the school district. And I just think about how many Black folks, how many folks of color were out here pushing for their kids, and it did not make the news. But because of who she is and where she lives and in this particular era that we're living in, we get a lot of views on that.
Yeah.
But there's lots of us who are like, no, we work for the kids.
Right.
We're here for the children. We're here to make sure that they have what they need to thrive. And how many administrators who've drank the Kool-Aid, who for some reason thought that they were going to be the change at one time, and then all of a sudden now it's not that. They've become just another cog in the wheel, like making it so much more difficult for us to do what we need to do for our kids. So I just wanted to say I totally understand that situation. And I love that you left on that note, right? And I didn't go back to teaching after that either. At that school really at all. That's probably not your story. But for me, I didn't go back to teaching. But I'm so glad that I didn't allow the system to kill what was inside of me for the sake of a job.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just wanted to pause you and say that.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, I guess being caught up in the moment, it wasn't until like maybe like a week later when I was sitting in the bar drinking and it kind of hit me. I was like, damn, you know what that man did? He separated me from my kids. It felt like parental alienation a little bit
Yes.
by telling me you
Yes.
can't come back in the building. I really rode for my kids. And my kids knew that. And to this day, those youth are like 30-year-old men and women. They out here in Philly, beyond
Yeah. Yeah.
Philly.
Yeah.
We still connect. I see them in person from time to time. I see them, on social media, living their lives. They got children of their own now. They got husbands and wives, and they doing grown adult things. It's still like they remember them being in my classrooms. I mean, I didn't condone or promote this, but at least I tried not to. But kids would cut other classes and come to my class, not to hang out, but to come learn. To come with their
Yeah.
notebook.
I
Like, come
love
like on
that.
somebody,
Yes.
like, nah, we ain't doing nothing in there. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, all right, do me a favor, go get a pass. Tell them you coming over here. It's cool if you give you a pass, right? Let's try to do this by the book. So, and they would go get a pass and then come back and slide back over. And like, especially that class in particular was a class called Black Philly. It was actually called African Americans in Philadelphia. It was a local African American history course that I created. I decided to create it because I said, people always complain about like, these kids don't even know this person, don't know that person. Well, it's like they don't know because we didn't teach them. We got
Period.
to teach them. So I
Period.
was like, I asked somebody like, can I create a class? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I'm like, all right, bet. So I created the class. The kids renamed it Black Philly. One of them just called it that one day. And I was like, nah, you know what? That's a better name. We going with that from now on. Black Philly. I like that. Black Philly. Because it's like so many people in Philadelphia, like noteworthy people of African descent. Mumia Abu-Jamal is from Philly, political prisoner Mumia Abu-Jamal, revolutionary, former member of the Black Panther Party, did a lot with the MOVE organization that was bombed in 1985. Well, first they got shot up in 1978. Then they got bombed in 85. Just a lot of things like that. Then people whose names you'll see have streets named after them, but the youth don't know who they are because nobody taught them. So like, so I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna start this class because I got a captive audience. So like, we're gonna talk about this stuff. So yeah, so they would come over to that class and just sit and just try to learn, and it was cool. But yeah, I think that was why being at the graduation and getting that recognition was so powerful, so profound for me because I realized that like a few days later, I'm like, damn, bro, you like really separated me from my kids, man. Like, and I grew with these kids. They was really my youngins. Like to this day, I still rock with like a lot of them whenever I see them. I say that I came like into manhood in that period, like from '05 to '08, those like 4 school years. '08 to 2012, 2008 to 2012. '05 to '08 was when I was at World Communications the first time. After I got fired from there, I kind of left teaching. And then I did like, I came back like Jordan wearing the 4.5 some years later. I left teaching because I thought about going into administration.
A lot of us do.
I was like, if this guy could
A
be a
lot of us
principal, I
do.
know I could be a principal, right? So I
Yeah.
ended up enrolling at Lincoln University because I was studying Amilcar Cabral at the time, among other people. And I got a book in the mail of Cabral's speeches, and there was some picture of him receiving an honorary doctorate in 1972 from Lincoln University. So Cabral, if anybody's unfamiliar, he was a revolutionary leader of a group called PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau and the Cape Verde Islands, which was colonized by the Portuguese. So they were like at war with the Portuguese, sovereignty and get their land back. It was an anti-colonial struggle. Brawl got an honorary doctorate from Lincoln University, and Lincoln had I think they still do, a satellite campus in Center City, Philly. The main campus is out about an hour from Philadelphia, but they got a satellite campus where you can get a master's in education. So I decided to go there. That sealed the deal for me. So then I went to Lincoln and for the next 2 years, and I kind of taught part-time, like after school programs and tutoring on the side. It was almost like I was back in undergrad again, going to school
Sure.
full-time. For the next 2 years, I got to spend more time with my daughter. I had just had a baby, my second child, in February of 2012. So that was like kind of the bright side of me getting fired, because in those next 2, 3 weeks, instead of being at work every day, I was able to just stay home with my new daughter. She was like 3 months old at the time. Got to stay in the house with her. She's 13 now. She don't even like to hang out with me no more.
But you had your time.
Yeah, at my
You
time.
had your time.
Yeah. She just need me to chaperone her
Yeah.
around places, nowadays.
Of course. Pick up snacks.
Yeah, she just want.
Yeah, listen to her music, not yours.
Yeah, Dad, can you give me some Chipotle or some sushi or something? Like, that's it. Like, that's all.
Oh, the sushi. The kids and the sushi. I was going to say my daughter and sushi and boba.
Yeah, the boba tea. Yep.
Yes, yeah. I'm just thinking about all the things that you're talking about, and this seed of like, I started to read, I started to get back into my consciousness. And I find that so many folks on the podcast who start to understand self, to take a step back, to put a foot down and say, this is not how it's going to be. That's the path. That's when you start having folks just say like, oh no, you aren't following the rules that I make up that make no sense for the school system. You're not with us on against the kids. Then we have a lot of like disruption and folks wanting to give people a lot of problems like bullying, mobbing, firing folks, threatening folks, just all kinds of, in some cases, like racial battle fatigue, racism related stress, because they just don't want to see folks successful. And what I've heard too is a lot of times it's administration, unfortunately, who has such a problem with the educator.
Mhm.
And I think that the administrators feel like a loss of control.
Yeah.
They just can't handle the fact that someone that they've imagined themselves being in charge of a school, whatever that means, and someone else, the students, not just admiring, but really wanting to learn from, wanting to be like an educator.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, I've worked really hard to make this. It's about me, or it's about whoever I want it to be about. I want to have control of what the kids like and do not like. And so your story definitely resonates with my own story, like I said, but the stories of lots of folks on this podcast.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Power is very serious dynamic or concept in school. Because at one point I realized there's a lot of talk about Black male educators, Black educators in general. But if you find yourself in a school where the principal doesn't like you or feels threatened by you, all that Black male educator shit go out the window. They don't care about that. It don't even matter. Because the last school I taught at in Philadelphia, let me continue the story. So I go to grad school for 2 years full time. Then I'm like, well, let me get back in the classroom. Let me start teaching again. I think I was like, let me start making money again. So I go back to World Communications, the first school I was at. And it's a different experience though, because it's not like how I left it. Well, the administrators are totally different. They were gone. Some of the same teachers were there, some of the same staff. So it's like, me getting adjusted to that. So I was there for a year. Then I ended up leaving there. Didn't get fired this time. I left with my own volition this time. Went to another charter school in Philadelphia and started to get settled in there. But then that wasn't a good fit. I think I saw the writing on the wall because I had some challenges with the administration. So I finished my coursework to become a principal. I had my master's in education and educational leadership, but I still needed to do my practical hours, right? So I needed to do certain activities that, administrators do. And I told them as a stipulation of me being hired, I was like, will you be able to support me in that? And they said yes. Then early in the school year, vice principal comes in and observes my classroom. And then she's like visibly annoyed or bothered by something. So then we have a conversation later and she's like, you're not at pace with the pacing guide. And I say, okay, I know that because some of the students need more support and more time on this topic, before we get to the next topic. And then her thing is like, no, you have to stay with the pacing guide. I'm like, again, so these are the situations I often find myself in, like people attempting to promote protocol that doesn't make sense and not being willing to be flexible where it actually makes more sense to be flexible. I mean, I understand and respect protocol and systems and whatnot. I see the value in that. But when it doesn't make sense, it's not going to lead toward learning. Like math is very cumulative. Then the students were telling me like, yeah, she used to be a math teacher anyway, and like she wasn't even that good and everything. Students say a lot of things, but sometimes I take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes I don't. We had a meeting and she told me like, until further notice, you won't be able to do the activities that you need to do for your principal certificate. Okay, so y'all are basically reneging on the deal.
Because you told her that you had a different way of supporting your students, and because you didn't just do what she said, she used something, leveraged that power to stop you from doing something else.
Yeah, basically. And also, the way she worded it was, until your teaching improves, you won't be able to do these activities. In my mind, I'm like, what rubric are you going to be able to use until I start steamrolling through these topics, regardless of whether the majority of the students in the room understand them or not? Is that what you mean? Does that improve the teaching? Me just going faster? That's what you want? At this point, I'm like experienced educator. So I see the writing on the wall. I think the next week I got an email about something. Oh, okay. So this is the part where they start the paper trail. I know this. I know how this movie ends. And this is like October.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, see, I'm not no first year teacher. You're not going to play in my face. I know what y'all trying to do. So then I start looking for other jobs because I already know how this is going to end. And then at the same time, like the school itself had some contradictions with it. Because for a long time, I was always interested in teaching at this particular school because it was an Afrocentric based charter school in Philly. And, I knew a lot of people that worked there. And even they had told me about some of the challenges and contradictions and whatnot. But I kind of still always interested in working there. And then once I got in there, I was like, oh, okay, this is what y'all talking about. It's very cosmetic, a lot of the stuff. There's some people in there that's solid, that's really about it. But then a lot of this is cosmetic. Dashikis and drums and all that. But it ain't really what it's supposed to be. I get it now. I see it. Okay. So I started looking for other jobs. And then I ended up with this Philadelphia school district at Central High School and went over there. It was a special assignment is what they call it because they didn't have enough math teachers. Their math classes were overcrowded. So they said if we hire another math teacher, we'll be able to do leveling. We'll redistribute the students in the math classes. And I ended up with, I think I had 2 sections of Algebra 1 and 3 sections of geometry. And yes, I was there for the remainder of that school year. And then I went to Overbrook High School, where Will Smith went to school, Will Chamberlain, many other people.
Can I pause you for a second?
Sure.
Because you have a long teaching career. Like it's a lot of movement. And what it's having me think about is what you said maybe like 5 minutes ago, which was Black male teachers. We need more Black male teachers, but all that goes out the window when any kind of disruption happens. It's just like, we just get rid of you. This like moving from place to place to place, I think it's really good for the audience to hear because I do think that folks believe that a Black male educator will get a position in a school, the school will love them and they'll be there forever, become the principal, as if your journey as a Black male educator, and maybe it is in some ways, but it's any different from a Black woman who's teaching. But from this side of the microphone, it sounds very similar, if not the same, to Black women's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Even though people talk about over and over again that there's only like 1.4% of educators are Black men, it sounds like you're getting the same treatment that Black women experience.
I've seen it. I know a lot of sisters that went through similar things. We've had these conversations. And that's why as I advanced in my career, one of the things that I would try to be very proactive with is when I would notice this sister is being treated unfairly, I found myself trying to offer support, even if it's just a conversation. Look, sis, don't even worry about that bullshit. You know what I'm saying? That's just what they're going to do. Then they're going to do this. Then they're going to say this. And then they're going to, just be prepared. They're going to do this and then they're going to do that. And then just make sure, just watch your back because this is how it usually plays out. I know from experience, right? We're in this together. Despite a lot of the pop culture, gender war propaganda that we see all the time, we really do have a lot of similar experiences. We are in this together and we got to really support each other in terms of those situations and circumstances. And the thing is too, a lot of Black women educators have supported me throughout my career, and they still do. I remember I had a vice principal when I was at Del Val told me something I'll never forget. She came in, observed my classroom, and there were some things that I needed to tighten up on. And then in my evaluation meeting afterwards, she was like, she kind of kicked it to me. She broke everything down that she saw. And then she was like, you always want to keep in mind that anything that you wouldn't want for your own child, don't bring it to the classroom for these children. And I was like, I couldn't be mad at her. If I had been a little more immature, more egocentric, I might have took offense, but it was she was right. And that's great advice. That was great advice that she gave me. I always operate with that in mind. If I'm not able to bring a level of quality that is comparable with what I would want for my own children, then I at least have to recognize that and try to compensate for it in another way. But definitely, I think that is the case. We do have a lot of similar experiences.
Yeah, well, go ahead, continue, because you've been to a lot of schools.
Yeah, I've been around. I've been outside.
You for the pavement?
Yeah.
It sounds like you for the pavement. That's good.
For the educational streets. I belong to the educational streets. Well, the thing is, I go wherever the students are. And then I was at Overbrook for those 2 years. And then I left Overbrook. And that's when I made my decision. I think this is one of your questions. What led you to leave the classroom? Because that's when I left the classroom the second time. It was 2 main, I guess, catalysts for that. So one was I did a professional development when I was at Overbrook, my first year there, and it was about hybrid learning. It was this new concept I had never heard of, hybrid learning. What they were saying was that in the future, education is not going to be so reliant on people, on like human instructors, on actual teachers in the classroom. The teacher will still be there, but less will be expected of the teacher because the teacher will like deliver instruction maybe half of the time, and the other half of the time, the students will utilize like online resources for their instruction. It's a means, I guess, to like take ownership of their learning more, which is a good thing. Sounds good in theory if it's done properly. And they also talked about the flipped classroom model with students like watching videos in advance of the lesson and then coming in and receive the lesson, those types of things. And then I was looking at some of the video samples that they had, and I was like, these videos are trash. None of my kids would definitely learn from these people. And I've used some of these resources like Edgenuity, some of their video content and whatnot. These guys look like they're from like 1985. Where did they get these guys from? What is going on? Like, what are you doing? These white people from like 85, they could have been on like Family Ties or something, like one of them old sitcoms. You know what I'm saying? Like Perfect Strangers or something.
Yeah.
One of them shows, right? So maybe think about something. Also, not being able to like realizing that I wanted to expand my reach, right? Realizing the importance of mathematics and realizing too, like, I'm not going to be able to teach the way I want to teach or need to teach in this space. At that time, and it's probably even worse now, it was like a dumping ground because I would really have conversations with the students and I would watch and I would analyze. And a lot of the students that were there, a very small percentage of them were in eighth grade and said, you know what, I want to go to Overbrook next year for ninth grade. A lot of the students that were there were students that had went to charter schools in the West Philly area. And for whatever reason, because charter schools often have a zero tolerance policy, you get in one fight and they kick you out, maybe catch you smoking in the bathroom or something happens, or maybe you get jumped or whatever might happen. And then they just kick you out or you end up transferring. That's how a lot of them ended up at Overbrook. Overbrook also had a lot of students that had just come from placement in like a juvenile facility. So that's why I started to look. And these were bright young men and women, but a lot of the brothers that came from placement, their orientation toward formal education was so negative. It's like they didn't want to do nothing. They were just there. I would call a lot of them, I referred to a lot of them as in-school dropouts. They were physically there, but they had already checked out mentally. Look, I'm just here so I don't get a truancy charge. I need to get marked present. And a lot of them, I would call it, I remember my second year there, I would joke with some of them. I was like, bro, you had fourth period flu. And fourth period flu, because we was on a block schedule. So last period was all the classes are 90 minutes. Last period is 90 minutes. So if like some of the kids would have lunch third period, and then they would just walk out the building and leave, and they wouldn't come to their fourth period class. And if it was my class, I'd be like, all right, so you have fourth period flu. You got sick, you had to go home. So that's how it was. That was like really the culture of building and the majority of the students. I did have some of my sections were more conducive to learning. So I definitely took advantage of those. But a lot of times, like, I had classes where it's like some people, in order for me to really be effective and like teach this lesson, a couple of y'all got to go because y'all aren't here to learn. Y'all want to sit in here and just have whole conversations about other things that have nothing to do with this. You're not locked in. You don't care about this lesson, this geometry or this statistics or whatever. And I can't kick you out because there's nowhere to house you in this building. There's no person that's responsible for that. And I think this is a very important conversation because people throw around loosely the term classroom management. And I'm all for classroom management, but I also believe that some things shouldn't have to be managed. Or a form of management is, bro, you got to go. Pack your stuff up and get out. You're not ready to learn. But then a lot of administrators I've found will push back on that and say, well, you shouldn't have to kick nobody out. If you have to kick somebody out, then there's an issue with your classroom management. And I'm like, okay, maybe there is. I want you to model for me how we can handle this situation differently. And especially when a lot of the classroom management techniques that I hear of really pertain to elementary and middle school level, right?
That's right.
I'm on a high school level, and I know somebody might hear this and say, oh, he's just making excuses. All right, call it what you want. But what I'm saying is, I'm on a high school level. I'm teaching an 11th grade class or maybe a 12th grade class. I'm dealing with 17, 18-year-olds that have been adultified. They might have been on the block all night the night before. And if I'm trying to teach my class, and what I want to say to this young man to man, is like, bro, shut up, bro. Like, I'm trying to teach right now. Then that young man might feel offended, might feel uncomfortable, may want to stand up, poke his chest out. And then I don't want to end up in a situation where me and him might have to step out in the hallway and he think he's going to get physical with me. And then I might end up potentially losing my job, right? So in order to prevent that, it's like something else has to happen. So I've always been just very curious about like what classroom management strategies there are for dealing with that level. Sometimes people just just don't come in here. Like, you're not ready, because the majority of people in this room, they want to learn this statistics lesson on percentile ranks and standard deviation and z-scores, right? That's what we doing. You clearly don't want to do that. And not only that, you want to have a whole conversation and disrupt the lesson. And that you want to distract me while I'm trying to teach. Like one of the laws of physics, two objects can't occupy the same space at the same time. So one of us got to go. I'm supposed to be in here teaching, so I'm not going nowhere. So you're going to have to go. But then in a space where it's like there's nowhere for those students to go, what are you supposed to do? But what often happens is it's like, instead of saying, well, yeah, we have to create the space for those students to go somewhere else because they're not ready. I'm not even going to say they don't want to learn. I'm going to say they're not ready to learn in that moment. If you're not ready to learn in that moment, one monkey don't stop no show. Why we got to suffer? Because you're not ready right now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You just got to go somewhere else for the time being. When you get yourself together, you want to learn, come back and holler at us. We'll be here. But in the meantime, you got to go. That is like a hot button issue for me, because like people always say, oh, it's classroom management. Like, all right, let's unpack that. Let's really unpack that and use some real life examples. Let's talk about how to really implement that in a real life situation. And dealing with high school, let's make it age appropriate.
Yeah, that part. When you're talking to adults.
Yeah, basically.
Or they are not basically, they are adults, yeah. 18.
Young women that's, out living their life, doing what they want to do. Young sister might be 16, 17 years old, but, you can't treat her like a child. You know why? Because she might have a 30-year-old boyfriend. So she feel like she a grown woman. Like, who you talking to? I'm on par with grown men. I deal with grown men. So it's like, I'm trying to teach my lesson at the board, and I'm like, sis, do you mind? And then keep talking. Still back at the board, trying to teach my lesson. And still, I'm like, I asked you once, you know what I'm saying? So then I put some bass in my voice, and now it's a problem. Now you feel threatened.
Yeah.
I mean, those are like real conversations. And I think a lot of time in the undergraduate education training programs, I don't know that that's addressed. I don't know that those things are addressed, how to deal with those situations. But I think sometimes one of the tools of management is you got to remove certain people from the space. So then the question becomes, what do you do when that's not an option or an alternative? Removing people from the space. And I will say this too. One of the things I had to learn was, it's something Beanie Siegel said on an interview years ago. He said one of the things he learned, I think he was on Drink Champs. Nori asked him, I think, what's one of the things you learned from your experience? He was like, everybody can't go. And he was like, as hurtful as it is, everybody can't go. As a teacher, you really go in there, you be like, nah, I'm going to teach everybody because I know how important this is. And I know what's out there. And I know what's going to happen if you get out there in these streets and you don't know basic math, you don't have critical thinking ability, you don't have analytical reasoning ability, you don't have problem solving skills. You're going to be unemployable. You're going to try to be in a trap somewhere. Somebody going to kill you or you're going to jail. There's no happy ending to this. Like, I already know what's going on. So you want to really help everybody. Everybody don't want it. And then the kids will be like, so many times, Mr. Parker, forget about them. They don't want to learn because they understand, like, bro, you sitting up there trying to get them to be quiet. We already quiet. We want to learn. Give us the lesson. Give it to us.
And every time you stop, and I talked about this a lot too, is every time we stop to correct the student, it's 2 minutes here away from another student, 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes too. And over the course of a K-12 education, how many hours of learning is lost for children who want to learn?
Exactly.
And it's hard because you want everybody to come with you.
Yeah, everybody can't go.
Control that.
So you got to learn. You got to, like, I guess if I could, looking at back in retrospect, I would probably reorganize my classrooms and be like, listen, those of y'all that, if you want to, like, these seats up front, this is the VIP section. This is for those that are locked in, that are serious about learning this content. Those of y'all that don't, for whatever reason, you might have something going on at home. You might be tired. You might feel ill. You just might need a mental health rest day. Y'all go to the back and just be quiet. Don't interrupt us because we taking care of serious business now. But yeah.
That's so hard.
That's real.
It's so hard to hear.
Everybody can't go.
And it's really hard I can't even disagree with you for so many reasons. But one of them is because I taught K-6. And that is not, an 11-year-old talking is not the same as a 17-year-old talking in class. And so I've often thought about that, like what happens to like kids that just what do educators do? How do y'all navigate that? And I'm glad that you're on here being honest about this and not saying like, no, we got to take everybody. We all got, that's just not realistic. And it's unfair for folks who really want so badly to take everyone with them to beat themselves up if that's not the case. If you're putting in 100% for your students and they're giving you back whatever number they're giving you back, you can only control so much of what's happening, even in your own classroom. And so, yeah, this is like a tough thing to hear because we want all kids to win, but it's what is real. It's realistic.
It sounds insensitive and it sounds harmful when you hear somebody say it, and also you got to consider what their intent is. Like, like a racist teacher that doesn't like black kids saying that is a very different context from black teacher that is very committed to black people winning generally and black children winning. It's like we looking for the best strategy. Like, what's the best tactic and strategy that we can use so that we can win? And if we try to help those, if we exert all this energy trying to convince, like if I'm trying to convince you, which is wild when we think about it, in 11th grade, that you should want to learn pre-calculus. First of all, I shouldn't have to convince you that you should want to learn pre-calculus. I shouldn't have to fight with you so that you can learn pre-calculus. Learning pre-calculus is a gift in itself. I understand that many of our children don't know that it's a gift because they've been socialized in a different way for many, many years, right? And what I would try to do is like in that classroom space, in that classroom time, whether it was a 90-minute block or whether it was a 45-minute class or a 50-minute class, is try to communicate to them why they should see it as a gift. And it's not enough time. And what I realized later on in my career was that wasn't the time and place for that. I wanted to reject that. I wanted it to be the time and place. It wasn't the time and place. So everybody in like education policy, everybody always want to talk about best practices and research based. This is research based. I got empirical data. Like it don't work. It's not gonna work. The kids are right. As painful as it may be, you gotta let them go. They don't want to learn. It might not be a consistent thing. It might be on Monday. I'm not feeling it. My mom was tripping. My mom was yelling at me this morning. I'm just not having a good day. I'm not feeling this today, right? Let him go sit in the back and chill instead of, bro, pay attention. Take your notebook out. Take your pencil out. Write this down. Take some notes. What's the answer to the next question, right?
Yeah, students have to have agency too.
Yeah, I would try to like force people to be engaged. It's like, nah, it don't work. It's not going to work. But maybe Tuesday, he might be better. Tuesday, he might be like, I'm on it today. Mr. Parker, I got you. Today, I'm on it. So it's not even like completely writing them off. Like, it's like, let you know, we have an agenda. We got a mission. We got work to do. So if you're trying to work, let's go. But if you're not, don't get in our way. This needs to be a conducive learning environment. And if I can't kick you out, you got to stay in this room, but just don't be in the way. Stay out the way. As the kids say, just stay out the way. And it's like a lot of people watch this or hear this, they go clutch their pearls. Like, oh my God, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like, nah, you got to do it for the benefit of those because you're taking it away from them. To let the other ones come. They can come around and come around if they want to. Or maybe you got some conversations with them like in the hallway or at another time. But like when it's time to do math, like, nah, we got to do math. Because this really is life and death. Like when you think about a lot of us that understand mathematics and we understand the political landscape, the economic landscape, we understand the direct correlation between like survival and math skills. If you like algebra 1 is a gatekeeper, math is a gatekeeper in general to opportunities, but algebra 1 is a gatekeeper it already was a gatekeeper. Now we talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence. Now we competing with computers for all these like these menial jobs that like people hate and people dislike and people go on Instagram and make their videos and reels about, oh, I hate my job. I hate working. All right, watch that job not going to exist no more. It's going to be a computer doing that job. Then what you going to do?
So so kind of going back to that same note, the reason you left and you heard this at this professional development, that it's going to be about technology sometimes and classroom teachers sometimes. And you said, I got some ideas about that. And this kind of is going into the direction of why you chose to leave education in this traditional sense. Continue telling us about that piece.
Yeah, so like in 2018, I had founded my company, All This Math, in 2017. Did the 2017, 2018 school year. I left the school district of Philadelphia. So I left teaching for the second time. before I retired back in 2012 and went to grad school. And then I came back like Jordan wearing the 4.5. And then I left the second time. And then I said, I'm going to build my company. So I started doing like math tutoring, but I was still like, I was teaching at LaSalle. I was teaching math methods courses to education majors at LaSalle and doing tutoring, just expanding my tutoring business, growing it. And then 2019, started teaching at two other places. I started teaching at Cheney simultaneously, also math methods to education majors. I was in the right place at the right time. Ended up teaching at Cheney. I took a lot of pride in that opportunity. I studied Octavius Catto, brother who was a math professor at the Institute for Colored Youth when the Cheney first was in Philadelphia, near South Philly, not far from World Communications, where I started my career at, my full-time teaching career at. He was also a human rights activist. He shared stages with Frederick Douglass back in the day, recruiting brothers to the Union Army to fight in the Civil War. But a math teacher at the Institute for Colored Youth, which became Cheney, was years later. So just being able to carry on that tradition and, work at Cheney and also teach at HBCU was important to me. Like I was bred by HBCUs. Like growing up in Baltimore, I lived behind Morgan State for many years of my life. Went to summer programs at Morgan, Saturday programs at Morgan, events at Morgan. Would walk through Morgan's campus on my way to the bus stop, on my way to school, in middle school and high school. Ended up going to Morgan, matriculating there. Then went to Lincoln, got my master's from Lincoln. But before I went to Morgan, I went to Morehouse for my freshman year of college. So I'm all HBCU. I got a whole lot of HBCU experience. They're not perfect, but they are what they are. They provide a lot of support to our people, and they have trained and developed a lot of our best and brightest. They're good spaces for us to get some work done that we need to get done for our people. I jumped at the opportunity to be able to teach at Cheney, and then I also taught in a night school program here in Philly called One Bright Ray, which was for students from 18 up to any age, anybody that ever dropped out of a Philadelphia public school that wanted to get their diploma. I started teaching math there. And a lot of the work that I did with those adult learners has influenced, that wasn't my first experience teaching adult learners, but that influenced me in the work that I do now currently with, a lot of the parent math workshops that I do. But just continued to like grow my company, doing more and more tutoring. And then I stopped teaching at LaSalle. And then I was just teaching at Cheney and also at One Bright Ray. Then I left One Bright Ray like 2021. But let me back up though, because I started my YouTube channel. So this is where the campus learning, professional develop, the hybrid learning PD comes into play, because in 2020, when the pandemic hits, that's when I start my YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is up to about 7,000 subscribers now. We got about 860 videos. Matter of fact, later today, I'm going to record some content on there. But yeah, so just, trying to just create content, video content, because Khan Academy has, a lot of a heavy presence in the educational space, and a lot of teachers use Khan Academy and whatnot. But I was influenced by Khan Academy because I was tutoring a young sister one day, and her teacher put a Khan Academy video into her Google Classroom. And my tutoring sessions are an hour, typically. Unless I'm working with very young children, like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, I might do 30 minutes for them. But this sister, I think she was in middle school. So we're doing an hour session. So she's like, well, my teacher put the Khan Academy video. Can we watch that? Can you help me with that? So I spent 45 minutes explaining to her what Sal Khan was talking about in this video. So then I said, why I got to be the middleman? Why don't I just make my own content that don't got to be explained by nobody, that our children will just be able to understand just the first time, right? In case they don't understand their teacher. So, or don't understand the textbook, or don't understand Desmos, or don't understand Math IXL. That also inspired me too. Just create my own content for our children. And at first it was for the children, but as I kept developing content and kept, with the work, I realized that parents need it too. Because every time you turn around, it's like a parent, making a complaint. I don't understand the new math. I don't understand the new math. And it's to the point where it's like, now it's like that response has been like institutionalized almost, where it's like, that's the knee jerk response. Like, it's the new math. It's the new math. So I'm like, all right, let me show y'all how to do that. So I got videos on there. So the channel is really for parents also. I think the only way that anything is going to improve in terms of math outcomes for children is if the teachers are able to partner in a serious way with parents, whoever the children are spending time with. I have some ambitious goals. One of them is that schools for us should be spaces for practice. Schools that we don't control should be spaces for practice, right? Because learning is such a vulnerable experience and a vulnerable opportunity. I may not want to be vulnerable to you if I feel like you don't like me or you don't respect my humanity or racist or you're classist or whatever you might be. You know what I'm saying? If I'm just here to practice, I don't need to be that vulnerable to you. Just give me the worksheet, give me the sample problems. I might have a couple questions here and there, but I gain my fundamental understanding from people that love me and care about me in my house or in my community, around my neighborhood, on my block, wherever. So school should be spaces for practice. But in order to do that, in order for them to become that, kind of reclassified in that way, parents and uncles, aunties, grandparents, whoever, have to know the math. So that's where I come into play. I'm like, okay, I want to teach y'all the math. I want to help you become the primary educator. In addition to that, I think that our children should be seeing math topics in school for the second time. When they see it in school, it should be the second or third time.
Yeah. Yes. That makes sense.
I don't want none of our children, none of our babies seeing fractions for the first time in school, or like talking about adding and subtracting and multiplying fractions for the first time in school. I want to see it first in the house, sitting at the kitchen table or in the car, having that conversation with their parents, grandparents, uncles, aunties, whoever, godparents, big sisters, big brothers, big cousins. I want them to learn from them. And then when you go to school, it's like, all right, we about to do this. Cool, let's practice. So school will be for practice. You're going to see it. Like, I already seen this, because like, that's where a lot of the math anxiety comes from. It's like feeling of being overwhelmed. Oh, it's too much. What is this? This looks crazy. But if you've already seen it,
true.
Kids don't be overwhelmed. Most kids don't be overwhelmed at recess. They get to show off. They like playing basketball, they like playing football, right? But they didn't learn that in school, though. They learned it at home, in the neighborhood. They love looking forward to recess because they get to practice their skills they already have. I think math class needs to be like that. It's going to require resources being created that are relevant, palatable, and useful for the community. That's what my company is for. That's what we're here for. We're here to help the community and improve the relationship between math and the Black community.
You've answered the question, like 2 questions in one, which is what helped you decide to leave, and then what are you doing now? And you've talked about All This Math, your YouTube channel, the tutoring that you're doing. But so many folks don't want to leave a traditional space. And there are a lot of folks who are trying to figure out how to retain Black educators. So this kind of comes to my next question. For those who are trying to figure out, especially in this time where funding for pipeline work is kind of drying up because of our current president and other factors. And so there has to be a focus on retention, because the pipeline of people flowing in is not as plentiful as it used to be. My next question then is, what do you think that schools and districts can do to retain Black educators? The reason why I think this is a really important question for you in particular to answer is because I think that a lot of folks think about retention in like all white spaces, like with just a few Black folks. But seeing how you taught Black children, taught with Black educators, your ideas may be the same and they may be different, but we'd love to hear like based on like all these places that you've been and all the things that you've seen that probably worked well and things that you saw that did not work well. What ideas do you have for the retention of Black educators?
So I do have a few ideas about that. But one thing I do want to point out is that, with my Black nationalist, Pan-African nationalist type ideology, is one thing I've learned is that oftentimes many of those that share my political beliefs, we kind of go real hard on like this mass exodus from the school system. We need independent schools. We need this. And which is true. We do. I believe that's the ultimate solution, like a vast network of independent schools, African-centered schools for Black children, right? People of African descent, right? However, one thing I've also come to learn is that most of our children are going to be in the public schools. They're going to be in the charter schools. So therefore, it is important for some of us to be there, right? Because that's where the bulk of the children are for now. So I first want to point that out because I had to arrive at that, right? Because at one point, I'm studying, I'm learning, and I'm like, nah, okay, the solution is we need our own schools. We need our own schools. And then I think it was an unbalanced approach that I had, right? Because I would hear people say what I just said, and I would be dismissive of it. Because I'd be like, man, listen, this is what we need to do, man. But we can be radical, but we do have to be pragmatic to an extent. to a certain extent. Not pragmatic to the point where it leads to inaction and we end up just helping to maintain the status quo, which some people do. Because some people will say, no, we can't do that because we got to be pragmatic. And then nothing ever changes, right? We should be pragmatic pending the realization of some radical goals. We should have the radical goal and be constantly moving toward that. So I want to say that first. But I think some things that the schools can do is like, well, I mean, realistically, you provide more payment. People need money. People need money, especially starting out. Make it, appealing and attractive. I think school has to be marketed differently. Like a lot of people think, like even when I would talk to my students, like, and I'm sure a lot of teachers can attest to this. When you talk to your students, you try to talk to your students, your bright students, and well, all students are bright. I don't want to say that. Talk to your students that may show promise and that you feel might be a good fit for education, formal education, as teachers, right? You recommend it to them. And then a lot of times the first thing they'll say is, nah, because I'll end up smacking one of these kids. That's the common response. That's like the canned response that a lot of people have. And what I would say to my students is like, well, why do you say that? Have I ever had to smack you? Nah, exactly. So why do you think you would have to smack somebody? And then what I was trying to expose to them was this idea that it's really about the rapport that you establish. These are also some of the same students that I have a positive relationship with them, but maybe some of my colleagues didn't, or we be in our content team, our grade team meetings, and then other three teachers are like sitting around just talking trash, throwing these kids under the bus. And then they're like, what about you, Mr. Parker? And I'm like, well, actually, in my class, he's one of my best students. Or in my class, she's one of my best students. So I don't really know. I'll talk to him. Maybe I'll have a conversation with them tomorrow, see what's going on. But I don't know. And at the same time, like just like I work with these people and I see them and I see how they move and I see how they conduct themselves. And I'm like, you're not decent. You're not a solid person. In my mind, I know I'm like, you're not a solid person. I would never hang out with you. You're not solid. So it makes sense that like the kid might act up in your class because you're not thorough. You're just not thorough. You're just not. Right. And there's a lot of that goes on too. But I think that idea that you shouldn't want to go into teaching because it's going to be a problem. You're going to have to fight somebody's child. I think we have to figure out ways to address that properly and appropriately and aggressively, like change the narrative when teaching. A lot of why I feel like I never got burnt out, like I left the classroom, but I still feel like I never got burnt out. Again, it's from the study. Like, I guess studying like our ancestors and the educational spaces that they created. And also like people in SNCC that would go down to Mississippi in the summers and started freedom schools and was trying to teach Black people how to read, trying to teach Black people math and just all types of things. Like for me, that's the baseline for education. So because I've been exposed to that from having studied it, when I think about like the inconveniences that I've experienced in schools or the disorganization or just some of the petty trifling behavior of like other adults in the building, it pales in comparison because I'm like, I realize how much worse it could be.
Yeah, sure.
And
yeah, that makes sense.
Because I've been exposed to that information. But had I not been exposed to that information, then I can see how people get burnt out. I can see how it's like, this is too much. But this is like carrying on the tradition. It's revolutionary work. I mean, teaching can be revolutionary work. It can also be very much oppressive and colonial work too. It can be revolutionary work if you look at it like that. And if you've like been exposed to and studied people that have treated it that way.
Do you think that people who see education as revolutionary work last in education as long as people who continue on with the status quo? Because it seems like unless we, like you said, build our own or figure some other way out or have micro schools or homeschool our own children and community's children, which is also like a form of micro schools, that if we don't do those things for ourselves and for our own commitment to education, that folks don't end up retiring out of education at like year 30, year 40. So like that's hard to say. Like we need more revolutionary folks in education when so many people in education are not trying to do revolutionary things.
I feel what you're saying. I think what happens is, well, I think the revolutionary educators like never leave per se. I think they never leave.
Sure. No, yeah, they're around and they're doing other things.
Yeah, I think they just like, they change position. When you understand like concept of what it means to do revolutionary work, you understand it's a protracted struggle. And hopefully you also understand this too, that Dr. Bobby Wright would talk about this, and a lot of Kwame Ture talked about this. Just like, even if it's not in the education space, but just in like activism work, I think one of the reasons a lot of people get burnt out is because of the expectation that they're going to see the results soon, or even see the results in their lifetime. And that might not be the case. A lot of the work I do, I'm content with the idea that I may never see the fruits of it, of the labor, but it may be something for my great grandchildren to see and experience and enjoy. But if I don't do the work, then they won't see it. So it may not be for me. I think a lot of people, we want to, it's like, it's social conditioning. It's like we live in a microwave society. Think about how smartphones work, how much information is processed in a split second to go from one app to another, pull up something whatever, everything is so fast, right? So then it's like, you mean to tell me I got to do some work and I might not see the result of it. I might not see the benefit of it. I might not be able to eat off of it. That's uncomfortable for a lot of people. So they're like, nah, I ain't doing this. But I think we have to reorient ourselves and say it might not be meant for you to see it. So yeah, it just might not be, but you keep doing the work. And a lot of times with education, you're honing your craft. There are things I can teach now effectively in a shorter period of time that would have took me much longer to teach effectively early in my career. But I had to practice and do the work of going through those teaching experiences in order to get to this level that I'm at now. And as I'll continue to grow and be able to be even more effective and more efficient and be able to help even more people.
Your strategy around retention and the revolutionary educator, what sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be that education systems have to shift their thinking around revolutionary educators being a threat. What sounds like for a lot of places, they feel like people are rejected because of the way that they think about education and our children, and shift their thinking and systems to welcome the ideas and the understandings and the histories that revolutionary educators can bring.
Well, I wouldn't expect that. Because the revolutionary educator will always be a threat. They're supposed to be a threat. I mean, in any system, the goal of the system is to maintain itself. Any threat to the system is a problem, no matter whether it's good or bad, right? But it's the revolutionaries that have to be the troublemakers, that have to agitate. If we build up enough momentum, reach a critical mass, then hopefully then the system changes. And then the new system becomes the norm. So then we create a new norm. I think that revolutionary educators have to be willing to build institutions. We have to build institutions. We have to be willing to, I guess, accept the fact that you may work for a public school in a school district or a charter school, but just understand that you may not be there for 30 years. You may not be there for a long time. It may be like, an apprenticeship. You may have to look at it like that until you go on to create your own space, your own educational space, right? And hopefully you can still have access to the youth that are in those spaces. And hopefully you're able to find out a way to do it that's lucrative, because we live in a monopoly capitalistic system and you got to be able to pay your bills. You need food, clothing, and shelter until we create a different system where people can have what they need just because they need it and contribute to the community, and they can receive things based on what they contribute to the community as opposed to everything being focused on profit. But in the meantime, I think, to your question, let me try to summarize an answer to your question. Higher pay, better training, meaningful training in whatever subjects, whether it's mathematics, whether it's science, the sciences, literature, foreign languages, and more time for training. More time has to be allocated for training. It's not a lot of time often in a school year for training. I think it's got to be more time.
So before we get on today, we went over the questions I was going to ask on the podcast, and I had the question of, is there a Black educator that you would like to shout out? And you said, actually, I have 5.
Yeah.
And can I shout out all 5 folks? And I said, go for it. So now's the time. Are there Black educators that you would like to shout out? We want to hear this list of the top 5 that you have to bring to us.
Definitely. All right. And actually, you know what? I might need to add two. How could I
Okay,
forget?
go for it.
Let me start with my parents. So my mom and my dad, let me shout them out. My original educators from the beginning. My dad is still a formal educator. He retired, but he wasn't good at retirement. So he ended up back in the classroom. You know, he's been in the game for like 40 years. Yeah, maybe more than 40 years. He teaches in DC at Ballou High School right now. She was in the classroom in Baltimore City Public Schools for a brief period, but my mom homeschooled me for a year. And my mom taught me a lot of foundational things that really helped me, that I was able to leverage over the years to get through, my K through 12 experience and then college and whatnot, to be able to do the work that I do now, that I've done in classrooms. So I got to shout them two out. John Henrik Clark, another educator, great influence to me, historian, scholar, teacher, warrior scholar. My mom also had the opportunity to be taught by him at Hunter College in Manhattan in the early 80s. And if she couldn't find a babysitter for me, I was probably like 3 or 4 years old. She would take me to class with her.
I love it.
So I would be in there. I don't have vivid memories of that, but something about like watching his lectures from the 90s and the 80s, it feels familiar. There's a reason for that. Asa Hilliard, definitely want to shout out Asa Hilliard. Abdul Aleem Shabazz, the mathematician. Dr. Abdul Aleem Shabazz at one point had trained more black math PhDs in the United States than any other professor. So definitely. And I think it's important to mention him and people like him, because if we want our children to begin to embrace math, they need the examples. They need to see the black people that studied math at a high level. And that has to be normalized. Like, they see the people that play basketball at a high level. They see them all the time. They see the football players, the rappers, the comedians. Yeah, they see all of that. They see the actors and the actresses. So it's really on us. I don't expect nobody to like black mathematicians, because that goes against the status quo. So it's really, I take responsibility for that. So I want our children to know the black mathematicians like Abdul Aleem Shabazz. And there are many others that I talk about from time to time, and I'll continue to talk about and promote on social media and YouTube and whatnot. Two others, Sam Brown. Sam Brown was my ninth grade Algebra 2 teacher in high school at Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. And he also was my algebra instructor at the summer program I attended at UMBC the summer before I started high school. And it was at that summer program that he checked me. I was playing around. I got to that program. I remember my mom, let me go back to my mom real quick. My mom was real solid with finding summer programs. My mom was vicious. Like, somebody should have hired her to like find summer programs. I had an official summer program like every summer of my life. Right.
Yeah. Shout out to moms for that.
Yeah.
That's some real work. That's true work.
Yeah. And I think that when I became a teacher, I never took a summer off. I think because I was conditioned like to just work throughout the whole year, like no summers off. Like, I never took a summer off. She found this summer program for me. It was at UMBC. I was just talking to my daughter Asada about this the other day. And I was mad at her. I was so mad because that summer I just went to chill, stay around the way. I had a little girlfriend. I went to hang out with my girl all summer, play baseball for the baseball league. She found this program. It was a residential program at UMBC, and it was a 6-week program. We came home on the weekends, but I was like, nah, man, I don't think I ever been so mad at my mom before.
Oh, this is an overnight.
Yeah, residential. Yeah, check in on Sunday, Sunday
Okay, I
night.
missed that
Yeah,
part.
residential.
Oh, wow.
Check in on Sunday, come home on Friday afternoon every week for 6 weeks. I first get there. I'm like, I'm a young 13-year-old boy, hormones going crazy. It's girls everywhere. I'm like, I don't want to come home. That first Friday, I didn't want to come home. I didn't want to come home. I was trying to stay the whole 6 weeks because the other groups, they stayed on campus. They didn't go home to the end. I didn't even want to come home and come back on Sunday. I didn't want to be home at all. So yeah, that program. But Sam Brown was my instructor. So I get there, I'm like so enamored with all the attention I'm getting and all the girls around and whatnot. And the first quiz he gave, I failed it. And I remember he gave back the quiz and he like leaned over and was like, you got to do better. You better than this, man. And I felt like at that moment, I felt like, damn, like my dad was talking to me, like I had disappointed him. So then I had to tighten up. I was like, yeah, all right, watch this. So the rest of the summer, I was like all A's and everything. Because just from having that conversation, and then as fate would have it, when I got to Poly, we call it Poly, Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, got there in the fall, he was on my roster as my Algebra 2 instructor. We just kept it going. We had the continuity, and I was already accustomed to his teaching style. And I was like, okay, cool. I get it. Let's go. And I was just, just learning. So I definitely want to shout him. I shout him out whenever possible. Well, and that's the beauty of education, because it's like anything somebody teaches you, once you teach it to somebody else, it just keeps going. And it's like, it's a continuum. That's why,
Yeah, it
like,
is.
nobody can be self-made because somebody taught you something that you benefited from. It's all about community. It's about the interconnectedness of humanity and community. People taught Sam Brown things, and then passed on to him, and then he passed them on to me. And now I've passed them on to so many students, just like he did as a
That's
teacher.
right.
So it's like, it's all about passing it on and like paying it forward. Last but not least, my old head, Barry Thomas. Barry Thomas, he was a math teacher at Del Val when I first got there. He was the department chair. He was like, old black man, took me under his wing. I was still like, it was like my 4th year teaching. So I was still a young teacher. He had been teaching for like already like 30 plus years or something. He had actually retired. He had left the classroom, became an administrator, and then like went back into the classroom as a teacher after retirement. So I think he wasn't good at retirement either, just like my dad wasn't. But he was like a father figure, like my old head, took me under his wing, would look out for me. And I think that's important too. I think oftentimes that gets overlooked because a lot of people, they go into schools and they start teaching and they don't get the support that they need. And sometimes support just means like, I need like an old head to like look out for me. Somebody I feel like that's got my back. Because sometimes you
Yes.
be in these silos and you don't have nobody that got your back. A lot of stuff be going on and it's like, it becomes uncomfortable and you become stressed. And then
Yeah.
you might end up taking it out on the kids. And it's not really the kids' fault. So just knowing like, whenever I was in that building, my old head downstairs, I'll go check him out. What I would do is on my preps sometimes, I would go sit in his class because we taught the same students anyway. So sometimes I would take my work, my papers I was grading, I would just go hang out in his room. I was go chill in there. It was that type of situation.
I love that as a strategy for educators to consider no matter what year they're in. I've never heard anyone suggest, you didn't suggest necessarily, but I love that you're saying that you did that, because a lot of us, when the kids leave, we sit, we close the door, and we're trying to get things done. We're running around a copy machine. And like, what would it mean if we spent 2 hours a week just sitting in the classroom with somebody who we look up to, just to see the craft being done well, and not waiting for the professional development officially to happen, and not waiting for us to be assigned to someone, but just saying, hey, I know what you're doing. It's working. Can I just sit in here and just watch and just absorb with the knowledge, right? And I wonder how many folks would be so much more successful, Black, white, or otherwise, if we had spent a couple hours a week just being in the space with people who know this work so well, right? And not just the math or the topic, the subject matter, but then the systems. They know the systems and the policies and the politics well too. And so I just wanted to pause on that, because what you just said is a great strategy, a great retention strategy. Is if I'm an educator and I will know I want to stay in this space and I know that people are leaving left and right, what can I do to make sure that I glean from folks at all times? And it is get out of your classroom and go sit and pay attention to other folks as they're teaching. So I just wanted to say that.
And it was organic too. So it wasn't even like the
Yeah.
principal told me, like assigned me to him and said, listen, you gotta like
exactly
link up with him. It's like, nah, you know how you naturally gravitate towards certain people. Probably seen him, heard him say something, probably was funny, we probably start talking or whatnot, and I gravitated toward him, he probably looked at me like a son figure, like 6 sons. So he kind of like took me under his wing like that. And then a lot of it was me learning life from him. He was an experienced, older, older Black man, been in education for a long time. I'm relatively new to education. So like he's telling me stories, telling me like, you might want to, do this or do that. Or when you see them do that, that's what it means or whatever. Having that support is important. My mom, she doesn't like to talk about this much, but her teaching experience, but she informed me that she was in the classroom for a short period of time. And one of the reasons that she didn't stay was because she didn't have the support. So I imagine like if there'd have been like at the school that she was at, if there had been like an older Black woman that could have took it under her wing and say like, come holler at me. Let me help you out. Just come hang out with me. I got you. Because in any profession, like just knowing that it's somebody in that building that got your back, it can make a huge difference. I mean, some of us, we're independent, but even the person that's independent, because I consider myself, I'm a very independent person, but even being an independent person, it's like you just appreciate that. Then it's like, well, I can be independent by choice. I don't got to be in this all by myself. Some people, don't nobody got your back. It's like, you're not independent by choice. You're independent by necessity. Like you have no other option
By
or
force.
alternative.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So I definitely want to shout him out, put him in that category as well as a Black educator. You know what I mean? Because in school, the thing about schools is that it's content, but it's not just content. Like it's socialization. It's about character development of young people. It's about shaping worldviews, influencing worldviews, and it's about ethics and values. It's about a lot. So it's more than just, equations. Even if you're a math teacher, like it's more than that. And that's one of the things I learned early on in my career too, is that, which also motivated me to start reading more. It's like the young brothers especially would ask questions. And, and I was like, man, I want to make sure I have the answers and have the right answers. So like, let me start studying more so I can like make sure that when they come to me with these questions, I have the correct answers for them. So, and then once I noticed, I remember being at World Communications, and like I said, I'm still in contact with some of these brothers, like, and they like 30-plus-year-old men now and living their lives and whatnot. But I noticed that they would come in my room every morning on their way to their locker as soon as they got into the building, just to come make sure I was there and come shake my hand, like every day. Like that was their routine, right? I wasn't their homeroom teacher. You know what I mean? They would make it a point to like come in and shake my hand. And at first I didn't think nothing of it, but then I started thinking like, okay, nah, this is serious. Like being a teacher is something serious. Like this is more than just about solving equations. This is about modeling. And when the young people choose you to be their role model, when they make that decision, that conscientious decision of their own volition, that's a big deal. It's got to be taken seriously.
I do. Trust me, I do. So you mentioned that when you were teaching, you didn't take summers off, that you were out here doing the work because you were, after school or summer programs when you were a kid, but we can't do that forever. And so my last question, last question kind of leads to that, which is like, for you, what does it mean to be well?
I was thinking about this question. I think to be well, part of it is at least having a purpose and having the ability to fulfill your purpose on a regular basis. And I think that can be an issue for a lot of people, just not having a purpose. Because not having a purpose is like having idle hands. It's like I was on another podcast talking to a brother about co-parenting. And one of the things I talked about was how in my own growth and development as a father and as a co-parent, a lot of the arguments that I used to have with the mothers of my children, mothers, I'm not ashamed. I'm a statistic, like a lot of people. But,
damn, that's all right. But you also are taking care of your
right, exactly. A lot of the arguments I don't have no more because I just don't have the time, because I have more of a purpose. I'm building something. I'm developing something. So it's much easier for me to just let stuff slide, or even not take offense to certain things, because maybe it wasn't even meant to be offensive. But how sometimes you caught up in the moment, you read the text message and you're like, in your mind, you're like, who's she talking to?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't even that deep for real. But when you have a purpose, it's like you're locked in on that purpose. So I think being well, part of it is about like having a purpose and finding your purpose, having a purpose, and the resources to be able to work toward that purpose on a regular daily basis. And I think that's also what people mean when they say find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I think that ties into that. That's how I kind of look at that. But yeah, I think that's part of it, having a purpose. And if you don't have one right now, I think we all have a purpose, but your purpose might change. It might expand.
Sure.
It might, develop into something else based on work that you're currently doing.
I love that, the having the purpose, understanding that. And that takes so much work to seek that out, to sit and say, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Why am I on earth? It can't just be to argue, like you said, argue over text messages or whatever, or bop around. It has to be something greater. And like, what is that? And how do I start to move towards that? What resources do I have, or what resources do I need to thrive in my purpose? That's when like, yes, this is feeling good. And like you said, it can change and shift, but you understand that and you're good with it because you understand it's beyond you. Like, all of this is bigger than who you are and what you need to do at this current moment.
Because I think people are like bored sometimes. Like, you're just bored. So like, you see an opportunity to like argue with somebody and it's like, all right, watch this. You want to feel successful and you want to feel like a sense of achievement. So it's like, even if it's like winning this argument, or at least thinking that I won this argument, I'm going to get a sense of achievement out of that because I don't really have a major purpose in life. So many people, it's like, I just work a job that is not really helping humanity. It's just contributing to the bottom line of some billionaire somewhere. I'm not really, but it's paying the bills. I get a paycheck bi-weekly and my life is not too eventful. I don't really get a chance to have enough wins. Let me go toe to toe with this person or with my baby mom or, so. And sometimes it's about accepting your purpose. That's another thing too. Because sometimes you'll have a purpose and you'll be in it, but you don't really accept it because it's a major responsibility. You might have a fear of success because it's like, man, I might end up being great if I do this. And then, there's a whole other set of challenges that come with that. And you might be, it's like you might be fearful of success. So sometimes you got to just accept your purpose, accept your fate. You might be the guy or the woman that's meant to go do this thing and nobody else is going to do it. You might be the one that's got to go do it. And then you got to just accept that. And then once you accept that, then you got to start saying no to some other things because now you're locked in.
So good. Yeah. So good. Akil, it's been good talking to you.
Likewise. I like talking about this stuff. A lot of my stories about like my teaching experience, I don't get a lot of chances to like really talk about them. Like I talk about math a lot and a lot of the current work I'm doing and a lot of the like things that are content oriented and like pedagogical, but like just the real everyday, like the real lived experience being a teacher. I don't get to talk about those like experiences as much. So I really appreciated this. It kind of jogged my memory too of some good memories. I've always felt, I wrote an article some years back talking about the therapy of teaching. That's another reason why I think I never got burnt out because teaching for me, being in the classroom every day for full school years was therapeutic for me. I like working with the young people. And I also found that I've been able to like work through certain issues from being in the position of a teacher because I would kind of see myself in a lot of them. And I'd be like, man, when I was 16, I was in this same situation. So it's like I almost get to live vicariously and give them the advice. They may or may not take it, but I can give them the advice I wish somebody had gave me in the way that I wish somebody had gave it to. Or maybe somebody did give me the advice, but they ain't say it in a way that I was receptive to. So let me try to say this in a different way and let them know, like, listen, you're going to do what you're going to do, but I'm going to just tell you, like, having been in that situation, this is what the outcome or the consequence was for me. Even stuff like that is like therapeutic. So it's almost like I'm talking to myself 30 years later.
Yeah. That's perfect. We could be on this call all day, but we got stuff to do out here in the streets and change the world. All right, folks. So Akil's out here doing some dope work. All This Math on YouTube, the tutoring, you're doing all these great things. Folks are going to be seeing you in community talking about ways that parents can advocate for helping their kids be more confident in math and teaching math at home. And you have a lot of good things coming down the pipe. We want to thank you for stopping and talking to our show. And I got a feeling you're going to have to come back and hang out with us a little bit more. All right, folks, it's another episode of the Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators. We'll see you next time. Peace. Thanks for tuning in to the Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators. If today's conversation resonated with you, know that you're not alone. Through Lyons Educational Consulting, we work to support Black educators in navigating racial battle fatigue, reclaiming their wellness, and building community-centered solutions that sustain us in and beyond the classroom. If you're looking for workshops, wellness cohorts, or strategic support for retaining Black educators, let's connect. Visit LyonsEducationalConsulting.com or follow me on LinkedIn, Dr. Asia Lyons, or Instagram, Hello Dr. Asia, to learn more. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.